Here's some words I never thought I'd ever say. I'm replacing all my paints with Army Painter. And I'm not even being paid to say this. I'm really hoping I'm not making a huge mistake here, because if the spelling on the box is anything to go by, it doesn't bode well. But if I'm going to do this, there's a question that needs answering. What stuff can I just not bear to do without? I'm Will, and you're watching The State of Play. Now, today is my 1-year anniversary on YouTube, and I bet everyone thought I'd disappeared. No, I caught a cold and then lost my voice, which would have made for a really silent video. So instead I took a break because I wanted to plan a new series of videos. There's now so many updated ways of getting models done that there's quite a few foundation things that I want to cover again, in more detail. And yes, doing these kinds of videos are totally an excuse for me to get through my epic galaxy of shame. I've amassed so many unpainted and unbuilt models that this room is beginning to look a lot like a Warhammer stall. But before I do that, I need to have a really good clear out, so today I'm going to flip the paint conundrum on its head. Usually these kinds of videos are all about which products you should have in your arsenal, what you should buy, what works the best, must-have paints or products. But this time, I just need to make space. I just don't have any more room to fit 306 new dropper bottles, so some things had to go. I thought this would be a great opportunity to force myself to make the call on what I really refuse to do without, and maybe give you a few insights along the way. This video is not sponsored by Army Painter, and I bought all these myself. Let's address why I chose Army Painter over all the other brands out there, and it comes down to one, maybe two really simple things. I actually wanted them for the flexible triads, which I'll talk about later, but more importantly, the huge box containing the entire range. Army Painter is one company, if not the only company, that does this. Now, most people don't buy an entire range in one go, but if you did, most other brands don't have a full box set anyway. And I'm buying these to finally replace almost everything I own, for reasons I'll get into. Pro Acryl, 2 thin coats, AK 3rd Gen, and maybe Vallejo Game Colour and the new model colour would probably be the closest equivalents to Fanatic paints, but you can't buy their entire ranges in one big box all in one fell swoop. AK 3rd Gen do have that big metal box, but I don't want to pay extra for that, and many other brands keep coming out in phases or don't yet have the range. So anyway, this video isn't really about Army Painter Fanatic paints or Speed paints. I'm far too late to that party. And I think it's probably worth noting that I've never really been a fan of Army Painter products anyway. The company itself, yes, as hobby companies go, I think I'd actually rank them number one in terms of ethos, passion for the hobby, dedication and understanding of the audience, and downright respectful way they'll admit and fix a mistake. Perhaps not the best company at packaging quality control though. But let's not rewrite history here. Army Painter's original war paints line were a tragedy. Watercolours had better coverage. The metallics were like glitter soup, and the first iteration of speed paints, well, that's all water under the bridge, if you wanted your bridge to reactivate and smear all over the riverbank. Whether you loved or hated Speed Paint's version 1, they didn't work for the way many painted. I didn't want to seal every colour with varnish just to tidy up some overspill or use a wash or glaze. But Army Painter, to their credit, fixed it. Their washes are very good, but the naming convention is all over the place. A quirk that sadly carried through to the new paints. Dark tone, strong tone, soft tone, and then red tone, blue tone, but then military shade, with the medium called wash medium. And they used to be packaged in a box called quick shade washes. So what are they called? Tones, shades, quick shades, or washes? And are we defining them by the colours or by what they do? It's kind of a hodgepodge of both. And the new skin washes aren't called washes or tones, they're called shades. Now I can see the logic there. Calling them strong skin tone and dark skin tone in 2024 is probably not the best. The artist formerly known as Twitter would have a field day. But why not just call them all washes? Black wash, brown wash, red wash, strong skin wash, with a wash medium. A great renaming opportunity. In my opinion, missed. Another thing in the new set that stood out to a anal, pedantic observer like me was every single skin colour is called skin. Except Barbarian Flesh. A Barbarian skin label would have cost them less in printer ink, and yes, I know it's a colour match to the spray primer, but it sticks out like a barbarian thumb. And The only other gripe I have with the Fanatic paints are you only get this one tiny bottle of stabilizer. Yes, you can thin with water, but considering this is the binder that should be used to thin all these paints, it felt a little bit stingy. Especially considering the Speedpaint set contains a huge bottle. I know you'll probably be able to buy extra bottles and likely a larger one, but as the singles aren't available yet, I really had hoped they'd have at least launched a larger stabilizer at the same time as the box sets. Sadly not. I guess we'll have to wait until, what, April 20th? Right, so after getting these sets, what things can I just not do without? What's in and what's out? Almost all of my Citadel paints. Now, this was an extremely hard call to make. Technically I started with Humbrol enamels, but I've used Citadel paints since the 80s, starting with the colour paint set and progressing through Creature, Monster, Space Marine, Orc and Eldar, Epic Battle and Expert, until Mike McVeigh revamped the entire range into hex pots. Now I've worked through all their terrible pot iterations over the years, and I've been rebottling them in numerous different ways for a very long time. If anyone remembers the screw caps, you'll understand why. So I've gotten used to their strengths and their failings. But my main reason for replacing them isn't the pots, believe it or not. It can't be. Mine are in dropper bottles now. It's not even the ever-increasing price tag or the dwindling pot sizes. It's actually the formulation of the paints themselves. Don't get me wrong, they're great paints, but when they separated them out into base and layer paints, even edge paints, and came up with a one-size-fits-all painting system, my love for them started to fade. I didn't really want to be locked into a base shade layer highlight way of painting. The base paints are often great for coverage, but trying to use a layer paint as a base colour sometimes required more coats than I was willing to paint, taking up way more of my time. Because layer paints are designed to be more transparent for layering up, it seemed like you were being cleverly manoeuvred into only ever using layer paints as highlights. Sometimes for speed, I often want to paint on the lightest colour available and then thin a contrast paint to put over it, then edge highlight. Boom, job done in 3 colours. But having to paint 4 layers of a layer paint first. I know it's a bit of a first world problem. Oh no, I might have to paint an extra coat. But most of us have limited hobby time. I can't be on painting 4 coats on 20 models. When they brought out the new contrast paints, especially ones like Imperial Fist Yellow, it just reinforced the annoyance I already had. If this stuff can do it in 1 coat over white, then why can't Flash Kits yellow? Which is also why I'm replacing many of the contrast paints. Now, I love some of the colours and the way they work, but the price, the inconsistency across the range, and no actual colour reference on the paints make them a range you have to learn rather than the paint you could grab, look at the bottle, and have some idea what the colour would be. Unlike this. The Fanatic paint appears to have great coverage straight out of the dropper with a bit of thinning. That's what the marketing's been telling us, and the limited ones I've tried have done exactly that. Time will tell if it's fully true for all the colours or whether the higher pigmentation will just dry them all out in the droppers. But even if it's not true, all the paints in the range do seem to have the same consistency, so I don't have to worry about using a more transparent formulated paint as a base colour. The other thing that sold me on the Switch was the flexible triads. I've been storing and arranging my paints like that for more years than I can count. I just never gave it a name. You see, I'm incredibly lazy when it comes to layering. Sure, I can mix paints incredibly well, just watch my ink mixing video, but just because I can, doesn't mean I want to spend a load of time actually doing it. Flexible triads fix that because you can do the laziest thing and put 6 of any colour on a wet palette in a lightness scale, and it's such a super quick way of getting models done. And I'm a huge fan of anything that speeds up a job. But there are some paints in Citadel's range I'm not willing to part with just yet. Rakoth Flesh is number 1 because no one has created anything even close to this colour yet. That very light brownish grey, and keeping that means keeping Pallid Witch Flesh too. Then there's these, and these. Mostly all sitting in the brown, light to saturated green, or the greenish blue spectrum, which have no real equivalent in the Fanatic set. Many of the Citadel colours that are desaturated, such as rust grey, can be recreated quite easily. We know from colour theory that by mixing in a light grey to Fanatic Night Sky, it'll desaturate and get an almost identical colour match. There's also a lot of the darker colours that I want to keep around, like Barakner Burgundy and Galvobak Red, which are only really to fill the gaps in the Fanatic set where a much darker colour appears to be missing. And then there's the contrasts. I really do like the Speedpaints version too, and the range is vast, but I couldn't yet bring myself to pack away quite a number of these. Snakebite Leather, Bile Red, Magmadroth Flame, the yellows, the skin tones, or the two blacks, Legion and Templar. You can never have enough options for black. I ended up keeping many of the new release ones that didn't actually act like contrast paints but are great for coverage, and well, why would anyone want to get rid of Plaguebearer Flesh? The rest of them can get packed in the Army Painter box somewhere easy to access because I'll probably dive back in at some point to grab the odd outlier, and many of Citadel's paint-based technical paints are staying because there's not that many of them, and why not have options? Citadel Washes. Now, I don't use washes as much as I used to due to thinning contrast paints instead, and the Fanatic range has a newly expanded set of them, but Citadel's washes are like crack. You try to kick the habit and something just keeps pulling you back in. I thought I was done with them, and then they released things like Targo Rage Shade and Mortarian Grime, and I was right back in Citadel rehab. And I still have a load of the original washes, which, let's face it, we all got used to. And yes, we all know they stained the surface, but it's something we learned to deal with, and even use to our advantage. The Fanatic set has a nicely expanded range, but it's still playing catch-up to some of Citadel's newer shades, so these are staying. Scale 75 Instant Colours. This is not a bad paint range, as many of the colours are really good, but I found I used them less and less because, well, it's almost impossible to see what colour they are. They weren't really a contender for contrast paints, but I did find them really good for using as ready-made glazes. But the colour viewing problem wasn't helped by the paint names, and I'm not spending a day gluing skulls to the top of the bottle and painting them. The ridiculous naming convention of miniature paint brands popularised by Games Workshop has bled into almost every single competitor. Citadel names their paints after a faction or race that uses that colour. Skavenblight Dinge, Blood Angels Red. And for them, that makes sense. If you're going to paint Khorne Berserkers, chances are you'll buy Khorne Red paint. But this never made sense for all other brands. Procryl doesn't do it. AK 3rd Gen doesn't, but Army Painter was smart enough to add both colour names to the bottle, as well as a super handy hue scale on the Fanatic paints. I'd love to see a time when all these superfluous names just disappear, because often the names confuse rather than help. Instant Colour Endurance Brown. Great colour, but it kinda sounds like a long bathroom break after a particularly spicy curry. And then there's Zucchini Skin. Have any of you ever painted a miniature courgette? Ever. But I am keeping the Dispel Magic Medium because it's actually really good for smooth coverage, great at thinning all types of paints, and is usually cheaper than one pot of Citadel contrast paint, despite its stupid name. Vallejo Model Colour and Vallejo Game Air. These paints were my first attempt at cold turkey when trying to rid myself of the Citadel habit, and just like your first few veggie burgers, they're okay, but you can't help driving to McDonald's at 2 in the morning to get your fix. They just weren't Citadel. Even though Vallejo have more browns than a maternity ward baby changing room, I found many of the colours were just too muted and their coverage was all over the place. Lovely carry case, but no, they're out. Well, not strictly. There's some I'll be keeping. I'll get onto those. Vallejo Metal Colour. These are literally the best metallics on the market for both brush and airbrush. Brush coverage is achieved in one single coat, and through an airbrush, no thinning is required at all. The massive issue with these is there's only one gold, which is weirdly greeny coloured, and only one copper. That's it. Seeing as these are probably the most popular metallic on the market, I don't understand why Vallejo haven't expanded the range. Yeah, you can mix them together, but you'll never get a shiny gold or a great range of brassy hues. So apart from this, I'm keeping these for 3 other reasons. 1, the silvers just cannot be beaten for variety and coverage. 2, because the Fanatic metallics still suffer from the same thing as all metallic paints. Thinning them for decent flow and coverage is a major ball ache. So you can mix these into your Fanatic metallics to thin them and get great one-coat covering power. The third reason is they make a brilliant base coat for the Speedpaint metallics or other speed paints, making the process super quick. One coat of a bright Vallejo metallic, one coat of speed paint, done. Then highlighters required. Golden High Flow, Tamiya Flat, and Molotow One4All. I've put these three together because I use them for the same purpose. They all go through an airbrush really easily with minimal fuss. The Molotow are super opaque and are great for coverage, and the Golden High Flow are often more transparent, so I can mix and match between the two. And neither need any thinning at all. The Molotow paints are also super compatible with my Sparmax Flyer, making them a grab and go paint. Tamiya Flat paints do need thinning with the X28 thinner, but thin so incredibly well and go on so smooth that I ended up collecting all the light colours for zenithals. I'm sure with the high pigmentation of the Fanatic paints, they'll work great in an airbrush when thinned, but why fiddle with that when these work right out of the bottle? I'll probably have to do it at some point when I need a specific colour, but for now, I'll keep my three go-to brands for the airbrush. Citadel dry paints, but not Dio dry paints. Dry paints are a bit of a misnomer in this hobby. After all, a paint can't be dry. That would be a pigment. And well, the high pigmentation of a lot of brands these days makes specific dry paints a luxury, not a necessity. Pro Acryl is great for dry brushing as it feels like it stays on the brush forever, and I'm hoping the Fanatic paint's 300 to 700% more pigment will be the same. So the Citadel dry paints are going. I mean, if ordinary Citadel dries out in the pots, imagine how long these things last. Some of these were a solid chunk when I first bought them. Matte medium to the rescue. But the Ammo Dio dry paints have a really nice consistency, a bit like face cream. Don't ask me how I know that. I have no idea what they added to these, but they have the perfect balance of moisture to paint, come in much bigger decent pots and just work really well. And I bought them to do some slap chopping and then never got round to it. So these are staying. Scale Colour Artist. I loved these when they first hit the hobby because they identified the pigments on the tube. They were great for mixing and great for heavy dry brushing, fantastic for edge highlights, and just an all-round great tool to have available. They're out really because the next product in the list did a better job and I could get them locally. And I found I didn't really need heavy body acrylic as much as I used to. Plus, some of these tubes had a habit of bursting during the hot summer. Liquitex Acrylic Gouache. Now, as I said, these replace the Scale Colour Artist range because they're also pigment identified colours that can be mixed perfectly. When you come from an art background, it's incredibly irritating to mix two miniature paints and not get the colour you expect to get, because mini paints are often a Frankenstein's monster of pigments, with added white, black and grey to achieve the colour. This often plays havoc with accurate mixing. Of course you can mix, but it's more trial and error than purpose. Now, I'm going to chuck this tip right in the middle of the video to see if anyone's paying attention, but if any of you watched my ink mixing video, it works with this range too. Yes, you can buy only the CMYK plus grey in this range and get yourself 168 colours. And these have pretty good coverage. They're staying because they mix perfectly and they weren't cheap. And goddammit, for the price, I'm going to use them. Inks, Pro Acryl Transparents and Ammo Shaders. Again, I've lumped these all together because I use them all in the same way. These are used for zenithals, shadows through an airbrush, deepening shadows in recesses, and to saturate the colours of my paints. White ink is also great for thinning terrible white paints. I'm looking at you, White Scar. Except, not anymore, because now you're taking forced retirement in an army painter box. Yeah, you can use speed paints in a similar way, but lighter inks will work on darker colours, whereas speed paints won't. Inks tend to have higher pigmentation and better covering power. The ammo shaders you may not have come across, and I admit these are weird. I got them as a gift, and as usual with me, they sat on a shelf because I thought it was another hobby cash grab gimmick. These are very thin acrylics, almost like glazes that have a very long working time. They're in very small 10ml bullet-shaped bottles that are really good at painting into recesses or filtering other colours. You then have a load of time to blend them out with water. And through an airbrush, they're really subtle. If I'm honest, you could probably get the exact same effect mixing a glaze and adding retarder and save you money. But I had these anyway, so this day. Dirty down rust and moss. Now I know this one is going to be really controversial. Some of you absolutely love this stuff, and I honestly don't understand why. I use this stuff on location for TV ads and movie sets to rust up a location and make it look realistic, then just wash it off with soap and water like you were never there. Because it makes really great real-world scale rust. On minis, to me, the scale looks all wrong. It doesn't look like a rusty sword, it looks like a rusty model. Now couple this with the fact that you have no control over what it's going to do. I've still yet to see a video of someone getting this stuff to behave. My toddler does what I say more than this stuff, and that's like once a month. It rubs off in water and you can't actually see into the bottle. To be really precise with this stuff, you need a super pointy brush, but as you can't see how far you've put your brush into the bottle, you just end up soaking the brush and destroying it. And you can't decant it because it dries almost instantly. The moss is better, but suffers from many of the same issues, and it's no better looking than enamel combined with a moss texture. And well, there's stuff I prefer. Green Stuff World Rust and Dirt Pigments combined with Vallejo Washes. Now, love or hate Green Stuff World, some of their products are really good. Their liquid pigment range is my favourite. They go on super bright so you can see what you're doing, but dry to a really subtle rust effect. And someone was smart enough to add a dark purplish tone to this set, like real rust. Now, the Fanatic range has 2 rusts, so it's probably a bit unfair to compare a pigment range with an acrylic range, but I figured using them all in combination would get me a more controllable rust look compared with sloshing on dirty down rust and crossing my fingers. Now, Vallejo washes aren't really washes as we've come to know them. They work in a similar way via running into recesses, but are really weathering products. They have a slightly longer working time and can be manipulated with water for a few minutes after application, so are much better for things like dirt, sand, grime and dust. You can absolutely use them as a wash, but it's not going to look the same as Agrax Earthshade. Blacks and whites. For all the Army Paint and Fanatic videos I've watched, the one thing I wanted to see was white and black. Is the black matte, and does the white cover? Those 2 age-old questions. And the answers are, no, it's not matte. Ironic from a paint literally called matte black. And for the white, kind of. It does cover well, but there's one white we always compare every other white to. When it comes to black, there's only one range in my opinion that got it right, and that's Vallejo's model colour range. You see, every paint range suffers from the same issue. The jump from black to the next colour up is always too much. Abaddon Black to Mechanicus Standard Grey, for example. Army Painter have done the same here. Matte Black to Deep Grey is a big jump in lightness. Citadel kinda solved it with Corvus Black, but even that has a big jump to Mechanicus. Vallejo has a huge range of blacks and greys, making this job much easier. Well, that's when you finally figure out which colour does what. It took lots of trial and error to figure out whether dark grey or grey black was the next step up from black. I'm keeping all my blacks. And for the same reason, I'm keeping all my whites and ivories, especially Procryl Bold Titanium White. Those in the know were probably waiting for me to mention this one, so here it is. I mean, this is the gold standard of white paint for this hobby. Great, almost single coat coverage, super smooth, not chalky, just an all-round monumental paint. Take that, White Scar. Now, I know, there are a huge number of other paint brands out there. P3, Reaper, Darkstar, Scale 75, Warcolors, TT Combat, etc, etc. But over the years I've picked up the odd colour from all of these, but never really gelled with them for one reason or another. Pots, finish, flow, colour range, and as I said at the beginning, they don't do big complete box sets. So I guess we'll see how I get on over time with an all new Army Painter setup. I'm sure it'll take some getting used to, but this hobby is nothing if not an exercise in patient experimentation. If you're looking for any hobby product recommendations, tips and tricks, or mini painting books, you can find them on my website at thestateofplay.co.uk. And feel free to join my Patreon where you can chat directly with me and I can hopefully answer any questions you might have. Thanks as always to my amazing patrons who stuck around when I lost my voice and took a break so I could reorganise my hobby space. And that's the state of play for today. I'll catch you soon.